Emily and I had been married for 35 years, and from the outside, we looked like the epitome of a happy couple. We were partners in every sense of the word, or at least that's what I believed. She managed her cafe with such grace and diligence that it had become a local favorite. Meanwhile, my career as an architect had flourished, filling our home with stability and comfort. Yet, beneath our polished exterior, there was a persistent, unspoken void. It wasn't just about the usual ups and downs of marriage. There was something incomplete in our intimate life, a quiet, gnawing emptiness that neither of us seemed willing to confront. Over the years, I tried to pinpoint what was missing. Emily was beautiful, warm, and kind. Yet there were times she seemed distracted, as if her mind was a million miles away, even when we were together. I shrugged it off for years, convincing myself that this was just what long-term marriage looked like. Then came the night that everything changed. I was working late in my home office, poring over blueprints for a project. Emily had already gone to bed, or so I thought. Around midnight, I stepped into the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when I saw the faint glow of her laptop screen from the living room. Quietly, I approached, curious as to what had kept her awake so late. She didn't hear me enter the room. On the screen was an email, one I wasn't meant to see. It was addressed to someone named Robert. I can't stop thinking about that night, it read. You make me feel alive in ways I haven't felt in years. My stomach dropped. I stepped back into the shadows, careful not to make a sound. My mind raced. Who was Robert? What was this about? The words on that screen replayed in my head like a cruel taunt. The next day, I couldn't focus on work. I found myself obsessing over every detail of our life together, looking for clues I might have missed. Had there been signs? Little moments I'd brushed aside suddenly seemed glaring. The way she hesitated before answering my questions about her late nights at the cafe, the occasional cryptic text she'd smile at before quickly putting her phone away. Had I been blind, or had she been careful? That evening, I decided to confront her, though I had no idea how to begin. As we sat at dinner, the words stuck in my throat. Emily noticed my silence. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice laced with genuine concern, or what I thought was genuine. I saw something last night, I said slowly. An email. Her face paled. For a moment, she looked like a deer caught in headlights. Then, just as quickly, her expression hardened. You went through my laptop? She accused, her voice rising. I didn't go through anything, I snapped. It was open. I saw it by accident. Emily stood abruptly, the scrape of her chair echoing in the dining room. I don't want to talk about this. But I wasn't letting her off that easily. Who is Robert? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. She hesitated, then sighed, her shoulders slumping. It's not what you think, Mark. That line, it enraged me. Don't insult my intelligence, I spat. You're talking to another man about feeling alive. What else am I supposed to think? Over the next few days, the tension between us was unbearable. Emily insisted that Robert was just a friend, someone she'd confided in during a particularly lonely period. But her explanations felt hollow, rehearsed. I couldn't shake the image of that email from my mind. Determined to get answers, I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. Late one night, while Emily was asleep, I found her phone and unlocked it using the passcode I'd seen her enter countless times. There, in her messaging app, was the thread with Robert. It wasn't just one email. It was months of correspondence. Texts, photos, share jokes. And worse, there were references to a night in a hotel room, a night she'd claimed to be at a business conference. I felt sick. The next morning, I handed her phone to her without a word. She didn't need to ask what I'd seen. Her face said it all. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. It was a mistake. I was lonely, Ma. You were always so busy with work, and I felt invisible. Invisible? I echoed, my voice breaking. I've been here, Emily. Every day for 35 years. How could you not see that? We argued for hours, voices raised, tears shed. She begged for forgiveness, promising it was over, that she'd cut off all contact with Robert. But the trust between us, how could that ever be mended? Weeks passed. We went through the motions, pretending for the sake of our children, our friends, our shared life. But inside I was a wreck. Every time I looked at her, I saw betrayal. Every time she touched me, I felt a ghost between us. Then one day I made a decision. I called Robert. I don't know what I expected, a fight, maybe, or an apology. But when he answered, his voice was calm, almost smug. "She came to me, Mark," he said. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention, she wouldn't have." Those words, they broke something inside me. I hung up without another word, shaking with rage. Now, as I sit here in the quiet of our home, I wonder if this marriage can survive. Can I forgive her? Can I ever look at her without seeing the cracks in what we built? The answer is one I don't have yet. It was supposed to be just another holiday party. Emily had spent weeks planning it, picking out the decorations, coordinating the menu, and ensuring her staff felt appreciated. She loved these events, pouring herself into every detail. I admired her dedication, but I wasn't thrilled about attending. These gatherings always felt stiff to me, smiling, making small talk, and pretending I cared about the latest trends in coffee roasting. Still I went. I always went. The cafe was glowing that night, strings of lights crisscrossing the ceiling, and the faint smell of cinnamon wafting through the air. Emily had outdone herself. She was in her element, laughing and chatting with her team, moving from one group to another like the hostess she was born to be. And then I saw him, Alex. He was tall, with sharp features and a casual confidence that grated on me immediately. He was standing near the coffee bar, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to Emily. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years, not just polite or friendly, but fully lit up. I couldn't hear their conversation over the chatter of the room, but I didn't need to. It was in her body language, the way she leaned in slightly, the way she touched her necklace as she laughed. My chest tightened. I joined a conversation nearby, keeping Emily in my peripheral vision. Alex handed her something, a business card, maybe, and their fingers brushed. It was nothing, a meaningless gesture. And yet it wasn't. Not to me. Later that night, on the drive home, I brought him up. "Who was that guy you were talking to by the coffee bar?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Emily glanced at me, surprised. "Alex? He's one of our suppliers. He just started working with the equipment company last month." "Why?" I shrugged, gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. "No reason. Didn't friendly." She frowned. "Mark, he's a supplier. That's all." But it didn't feel like all. The way she'd lit up around him, it gnawed at me. I told myself I was overreacting, that I was seeing things that weren't there. But the doubt had already taken root. Over the next few weeks, I noticed small changes in Emily. She seemed more upbeat, more engaged with her work. At first, I was relieved, anything to pull us out of the rut we'd been in. But then I started to wonder, was her mood tied to Alex? I hated myself for even thinking it. After everything we'd been through, I wanted to believe her when she said the affair with Robert was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. She'd promised to rebuild my trust, and I'd promised to try. But now, with Alex in the picture, the wounds felt fresh again. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I glanced at it, my heart pounding. It was a text from Alex. "Thanks for the coffee samples today. You always make work more fun," smiley face. I stared at the message, a sick feeling pooling in my stomach. It was innocent enough on the surface, but the smiley face felt like a punch in the gut. Did he text all his clients like that? Or was there something more? Emily came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel. She saw me holding her phone and froze. "Mark, what are you doing?" I looked up at her, the message still on the screen. "Why is Alex texting you after hours?" Her eyes widened, and she snatched the phone from my hand. "It's just work. He's thanking me for the samples I gave him earlier." With a smiley face? She sighed, exasperated. "Are we really doing this again? Mark, I told you, there's nothing going on. Alex is just a colleague." But I couldn't let it go. "That's what you said about Robert?" Emily's face fell, and for a moment, she looked like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "I've been trying, Mark. I've been trying to fix things between us, but you keep punishing me for one mistake. Because I can't go through that again. I shot back. I won't. The tension between us grew in the weeks that followed. Emily stopped mentioning Alex altogether, but that only made me more suspicious. Was she avoiding the topic because there was nothing to say, or because there was too much? One evening, I decided to confront the issue head-on. Emily had gone to a networking event, one I knew Alex would be attending. She'd invited me to come, but I declined. I wasn't in the mood to play nice. Instead, I waited up for her, the hours dragging by as my imagination ran wild. When she finally walked through the door, I was sitting on the couch, the TV muted. "How was the event?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "It was fine," she said, kicking off her heels. "Long. I'm exhausted. Did you see Alex?" She hesitated just for a second. "Yes. He was there. Did you talk to him?" Emily sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Mark, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep defending myself every time I talk to a man. If you don't trust me, just say it." "I don't trust him," I admitted. "And I don't trust what he brings out in you." She stared at me, a mix of anger and sadness in her eyes. "What he brings out in me? Do you hear yourself? You're so caught up in your jealousy that you can't see what's really going on." "And what's that?" I asked, my voice rising. "That I'm trying to feel something again," she shouted, her voice breaking. "Something other than guilt and shame. Something other than this constant, crushing weight of trying to fix a marriage that feels broken." Her words hit me like a freight train. I sat back, stunned. For the first time, I realized that my jealousy wasn't just about Alex. It was about me, my fear of losing her, my fear of being not enough. That night, we didn't sleep in the same bed. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words in my head. Was she right? Had I been so focused on guarding what was left of our marriage that I'd stopped trying to rebuild it? The next morning, Emily was gone before I woke up. She left a note on the kitchen counter. "We need to talk. But not like this. Let's figure this out together." For the first time in months, I felt a sliver of hope. But the shadow of Alex lingered. Whether he was a symptom of our problems or their cause, I didn't know. All I knew was that if we didn't address the cracks in our foundation, it wouldn't matter who else came into the picture. Our marriage wouldn't survive. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the room heavy with the kind of silence that had settled between us too often lately. Emily was staring at her mug, running her finger along its rim. It was her way of avoiding eye contact, something I'd come to recognize over the years. But this time, I couldn't let her evade the moment. "We need to talk, Emily," I said, breaking the silence. Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, and for a moment, I thought she might get defensive. But instead, she nodded. "I know," she whispered. That was how it began, the conversation I'd been dreading and longing for in equal measure. It wasn't about Alex, not directly. It was about us, about the distance that had crept into our marriage long before he showed up. We talked for hours, our voices low and steady, peeling back layers of hurt and misunderstanding. And then, somehow, we found ourselves on the subject we'd avoided for decades: intimacy. "Do you ever feel like we're holding back?" she asked, her voice tentative, as if she feared my reaction. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I don't know what to do about it. It's not like there's a manual for this kind of thing." Emily gave a small, wry smile. "Maybe we need to write our own manual?" It was such a simple statement, but it felt like a revelation. For years, we danced around the topic, pretending everything was fine, hoping the spark would reignite on its own. But now, faced with the possibility of losing each other, we finally had the courage to ask the hard questions. That night, we lay in bed, facing each other in the dark. The air between us crackled with something new, or maybe something old that we'd forgotten. "Tell me what you want," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily hesitated, her fingers brushing against mine. "I want to feel alive again," she said. "I want us to stop pretending, to stop being afraid of what the other might think." I swallowed hard, her honesty both exhilarating and terrifying. I said. "But only if you do the same for me." She nodded, and that was how it began, our unspoken agreement to stop holding back. Over the next few weeks, We explored parts of our relationship we'd never dared to before. We talked openly about our fantasies, about the things we'd been too shy or too proud to admit. Some of it was awkward, even a little embarrassing at first, but it brought us closer than we'd been in years. It wasn't just our nights that changed, it was everything. I started looking forward to coming home, knowing that Emily would greet me with a smile that felt genuine, not forced. We found reasons to touch each other again, little gestures that had once been second nature but had fallen by the wayside over time. A hand on the back as we passed in the hallway, a brush of fingers while setting the table, small things that felt monumental in their simplicity. And yet, something still lingered in the shadows. Alex. I didn't bring him up, not at first. Things were going so well between us that I didn't want to risk shattering the fragile progress we'd made. But I wasn't blind. I saw the way her face lit up when she got a text, the way she quickly tucked her phone away when she thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't like before, not blatant, not overt, but it was there. One evening, as we were sitting on the couch, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen, and I saw her jaw tighten. She didn't pick it up, but the moment was enough to break the spell. Is it him? I asked. She froze, her eyes darting to mine. Mark. Don't lie to me, Emily, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. I'm not accusing you of anything. I need to know. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded. It's Alex, she admitted. But it's not what you think. Then what is it? I asked, my chest tightening. She hesitated as if weighing how much to reveal. He's a friend. Or at least that's what I keep telling myself. But Mark, I can't stop thinking about him. And I hate myself for it. Her confession hit me like a freight train. Part of me had been bracing for it, but hearing the words out loud was something else entirely. Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What is it about him? Emily looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. It's not about him, not really. It's about how he makes me feel, like I'm still desirable. Like I'm more than just a wife, or a business owner, or a mother. Her words cut deep, but I forced myself to listen. And I don't make you feel that way? You do, she said quickly. Especially lately. But it's different. With you, it's history. It's familiarity. We sat in silence for a long time after that, the weight of her words pressing down on both of us. I didn't know what to say, how to respond. Part of me wanted to yell, to demand she cut him out of her life entirely. But another part of me, the part that had spent months trying to rebuild what we'd lost, knew that wouldn't work. She had to make that decision herself. I don't want to lose you, Emily, I said finally. But I can't compete with him. I can only be me. And if that's not enough, then we need to figure out what that means. Her eyes filled with tears, and she reached across the table to take my hand. You are enough, Mark. I swear you're. I need to figure out why I keep chasing this feeling. Why it's not enough for me to just be happy with what we have. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the truth. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that was what we needed most. The truth, no matter how painful it might be. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. Hope, fear, jealousy, and, surprisingly, relief. We didn't have all the answers, not yet. But we were talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't in years. And for now, that was enough. At least, I hoped it would be. The moment she said the words, the air left the room. We were sitting at the kitchen table again, our place for hard conversations, it seemed. Emily was clutching her mug like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her face was pale, her eyes brimming with tears she hadn't let fall yet. And then she said it. I think I need to spend time with Alex. To figure out what this is, what I'm feeling. For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. Surely she hadn't just suggested, but no. She had. The words hung between us, sharp and unbearable. You want to see him, I said, my voice low, hollow. It wasn't a question. She nodded, her hands trembling. I don't want to lie to you, Mark. I don't want to sneak around or betray you. But I can't keep ignoring this. I need to know if it's real or if it's just a fantasy. I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, my chest like it was being crushed under an invisible weight. My mind raced, trying to process what she was asking. After everything we'd been through, Robert, the rebuilding, the talks about trust and honesty, and now this? I don't know what to say. I finally managed, my voice shaking. "Mark," she said softly, reaching for my hand. I flinched before she could touch me, and her face crumpled. "This isn't about replacing you. I love you. I want us to work. But if I don't face this, if I don't figure it out, I'm afraid it'll keep eating away at me." I snapped, anger finally breaking through the haze of pain. "You think this is going to help us? You think spending time with another man?" My voice broke. I couldn't finish the sentence. She looked down, tears spilling over her cheeks. "I don't know. I don't know anything right now. That's why I need this. To understand." "Understand what?" I shouted, slamming my hand on the table. "That you're bored? That I'm not enough? Because let me tell you, Emily, I already got that message loud and clear." Her sobs filled the silence that followed, and I hated myself for making her cry. But I hated her more for putting me in this position. For the next few days, I was a mess. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on work. All I could think about was Emily and Alex, what they talk about, what they do. The images that flooded my mind were unbearable, each one worse than the last. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell her she couldn't do this, that if she needed Alex so badly, she could leave and never come back. But I couldn't. Because as much as it hurt, I still loved her. And deep down, I knew that forbidding her wouldn't solve anything. If I said no, she might do it anyway, and then we'd be right back where we started. Lies, betrayal, secrets. So when she brought it up again, her voice hesitant and her eyes pleading, I forced myself to listen. "If you can't do this, Mark, I understand," she said. "If it's too much, if it's a deal breaker, I'll walk away. But I don't want to leave you. I want to find a way to make this work." "And what happens when you decide Alex is what you really want?" I asked bitterly. She shook her head. "That's not what this is about. This is about figuring out why I feel this way so I can let it go. So I can come back to us fully." Her words sounded earnest, but they didn't bring me any comfort. "What do you want from me, Emily?" I asked, my voice raw. "Permission? Approval? Because I can't give you those. But if you need to do this, I won't stop you." It felt like signing my own death warrant. But I said it. And I meant it. The first time she went to see him, I thought I was going to lose my mind. She told me where she was going, what time she'd be back, and promised there was nothing physical happening. Just a conversation, just clarity. But that didn't stop my imagination from running wild. I paced the house for hours, replaying every moment of our marriage in my mind. The good, the bad, the in-between. I thought about our kids, our home, the life we'd built together. Was it all crumbling now? Was this how it ended, not with a fight or an affair, but with a slow unraveling? When she finally came home, her face was flushed, her eyes red like she'd been crying. I didn't ask her how it went. I didn't want to know. The days turned into weeks, and Emily's time with Alex became a regular occurrence. She was always honest about it, always upfront about when and where they were meeting. But that didn't make it any easier. At first, I tried to distract myself, throwing myself into work, going to the gym, even meeting up with friends I hadn't seen in years. But nothing helped. No matter where I was or what I was doing, a part of me was always with her, wondering what she was doing, what she was feeling. One night, after she'd come back from another meeting with Alex, I finally broke. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice trembling. She looked at me, her eyes filled with pain. "I don't know," she said. "I don't think so. But I feel something and I don't understand it." Her honesty was both a knife to the heart and a strange kind of relief. At least she wasn't lying to me. At least she wasn't pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. But it didn't make it hurt any less. Our intimate life suffered, despite our best efforts. Every time she touched me, I couldn't help but wonder if she was thinking about Alex. Every time we kissed, I wondered if she was comparing me to him. The doubts and insecurities gnawed at me, eroding what little confidence I had left. And yet, there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when it felt like we were still us. Like we could get through this. Like we could come out the other side stronger. But those moments were rare. and as much as I tried to hold on to them, they slipped through my fingers like sand. One night as we lay in bed, I turned to her. "Is this worth it?" I asked. "Is he worth it?" She didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know," she said. "But I hope we are." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could survive this, that our marriage was strong enough to withstand even this. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to the sound of her breathing, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, one piece at a time. I found out the truth by accident, ironic, given how much I had tried to trust her, to give her the space she claimed she needed. Emily hadn't hidden her meetings with Alex, not after she'd proposed this whole twisted idea of figuring out her feelings. But one night, while I was going through the motions of cleaning up after dinner, her phone buzzed on the counter. Without thinking, I glanced at the screen. It was a message from Alex. "Tonight was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you." My stomach turned. Amazing. What did that mean? What exactly had they done that made it so amazing? I picked up her phone. I knew I shouldn't. I'd promised myself I wouldn't snoop again, that I wouldn't let suspicion consume me like it had before. But this wasn't suspicion, it was confirmation. I opened the message thread, my hands trembling. What I saw shattered whatever hope I had left. They'd gone beyond talking. Far beyond. When Emily came home later that night, I was waiting in the living room. Her face lit up in surprise when she saw me still awake. Then she noticed my expression, the divorce papers on the coffee table, and her smile faltered. "Mark," she started, her voice tentative. "Don't," I said, my voice cold. "I saw the texts, Emily." "I know." Her face drained of color. She sat down slowly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's not what you think," she said weakly. "Don't insult me," I snapped. "You've been lying to me this whole time. You said this was about understanding your feelings, about being honest. But you weren't honest, were you? You were just waiting for the right moment to replace me." "That's not true," she cried, her voice breaking. "I didn't plan this, Mark. I didn't mean for it to happen." "But it did," I said bitterly. "You made your choice, Emily. And now I'm making mine." Filing for divorce felt both liberating and devastating. For weeks, I'd been trapped in this limbo, trying to hold onto a marriage that had already slipped through my fingers. But now, as I sat in the lawyer's office, signing the papers that would officially end our 35 years together, I felt an ache deep in my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the loss of everything we'd built, everything we'd been. I thought telling the kids would be the hardest part. But when the time came, I realized I wasn't just telling them about the divorce, I was telling them why. We gathered in the living room, the air heavy with tension. Emily sat on one end of the couch, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I stood by the fireplace, unable to sit down, unable to look at her. "Your mother and I are getting a divorce," I began, my voice steady but cold. "And you deserve to know the truth." "Mark," Emily said sharply, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't do this." I ignored her. I turned to our son and daughter, who were both staring at me with a mix of confusion and dread. "Your mother had an affair," I said bluntly. "With Alex, the supplier she's been spending time with." The room exploded. Our daughter, Anna, burst into tears, demanding to know how Emily could do this to us. Our son, Michael, sat in stunned silence, his face pale. Emily tried to defend herself, to explain, but her words only seemed to make things worse. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "It wasn't about hurting your father. I was lost. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us." "By cheating on him?" Anna shot back, her voice trembling with anger. "By throwing away everything for some guy you barely know?" Michael finally spoke, his voice low and filled with disappointment. "You didn't even try to fix it, did you? You just gave up." Emily broke down, sobbing into her hands. I wanted to feel vindicated, to relish the fact that our children saw her for what she'd done. But all I felt was emptiness. Word spread quickly among our friends and family. I didn't shy away from the truth when people asked why we were divorcing. I told them what Emily had done, how she'd betrayed me. I wasn't trying to destroy her reputation, I was just tired of protecting her at the expense of my own dignity. But the fallout was worse than I expected. Friends we'd known for decades stopped calling her, stopped inviting her to gatherings. Some of them reached out to me, expressing their support and outrage on my behalf. Others stayed silent, unsure of how to navigate the wreckage. Emily's cafe took a hit as well. Customers who'd once admired her warmth and dedication began whispering about her behind her back. A few even stopped coming altogether. She tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks forming. For someone who'd built her life on being well-liked, the loss of her reputation was a crushing blow. For me, the hardest part wasn't the public fallout. It was the private moments, the quiet reminders of the life we'd shared. Packing up my things, dividing our belongings, walking through the empty house we'd once called home, it was like tearing off pieces of myself, one by one. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where it all went wrong. Was it my fault? Had I been too distant, too focused on work? Could I have done more to save us, to make her feel loved and wanted? But then I'd remember the texts, the lies, the look in her eyes when she'd admitted her feelings for Alex. And I'd remind myself that some things couldn't be undone. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. Emily and I barely spoke during that time, communicating only through our lawyers or the occasional terse email about logistics. The kids stayed with me most of the time, though they visited her occasionally out of a sense of obligation. I tried to move on, to build a new life without her. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, even went on a few dates. But no matter what I did, there was always a part of me that felt like it was missing, like I'd left it behind in the ashes of our marriage. As for Emily, I heard bits and pieces about her from mutual friends. She was still seeing Alex, though their relationship was reportedly rocky. I didn't care enough to ask for details. She'd made her choice, and now she was living with the consequences. Looking back, I wish things had ended differently. I wish we could have found a way to save what we had, to rebuild the trust and love that had been broken. But some wounds cut too deep, some betrayals leave scars that never fully heal. In the end, all I could do was pick up the pieces of my life and try to move forward. Without her,